My name is Jason Mitchell, and at 34 years old, I finally built the tech company of my dreams. But family validation? That was still my white whale. Sitting at that upscale Boston restaurant, watching my brother Derek's face contort with anger, I should have been prepared for what came next. "You're always the disappointment," he spat while our parents and siblings watched in awkward silence. I just smiled, paid the $2,000 bill, and walked out. Before I tell you what happened when my brother showed up at my door the next day, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever dealt with family who couldn't see your worth, hit that subscribe button. Growing up in suburban Massachusetts as the younger of two boys shaped my entire identity. Our family dynamic was established early and remained frustratingly consistent throughout my childhood. Derek, for years my senior at 38 now, was what everyone called the golden child. He had it all: athletic prowess that earned him captain positions on every sports team, popularity that made our home the weekend hangout spot, and straight-A report cards that plastered our refrigerator. Our parents, Robert and Linda Mitchell, were themselves high achievers. Dad built a successful dental practice from the ground up after graduating top of his class. His office walls were covered with community service awards and certifications. Mom served as principal at the local high school, known for her strict discipline and unwavering standards. They created a household where excellence wasn't celebrated, it was expected. I still remember sitting at our kitchen table in 3rd grade, struggling with basic multiplication, while Derek effortlessly completed algebra homework. "Just focus, Jason," my father would say, the disappointment evident in his tone. What none of us knew then was that I was battling undiagnosed ADHD. My brain simply worked differently, but different wasn't acceptable in the Mitchell household. By high school, the contrast between Derek and me couldn't have been starker. He quarterbacked the football team to state championships 2 years running. I joined the computer club and was immediately labeled the family nerd. While Derek attended weekend parties, I built primitive websites and taught myself coding languages. "He's just playing games," my father would explain to relatives when they asked about my computer interest. College selection season only widened the gap. Derek received a full-ride football scholarship to a prestigious university. The celebration lasted an entire weekend, with neighbors stopping by to congratulate him. 3 months later, my acceptance to community college was acknowledged with a simple nod and, "At least it's affordable." While Derek majored in business and minored in biology, perfectly positioning himself to eventually join Dad's practice, I threw myself into computer science. Those 2 years at community college were actually transformative for me. Without family pressure constantly breathing down my neck, I flourished academically for the first time. I transferred to a state university to complete my degree, though the achievement was overshadowed by Derek's graduate school acceptance that same week. After graduation, our paths continued to diverge. Derek returned home, joining Dad's dental practice. Within 3 years, he became a partner, his name added to the office signage. Meanwhile, I moved to Boston and launched my first startup at 24. It failed spectacularly within 18 months. My second venture showed more promise but ultimately collapsed when our main investor pulled out. Each failure was met with thinly veiled satisfaction from my family. "There's always a position at the practice," Dad would offer, not as genuine support but as confirmation that my chosen path was foolish. Derek would chime in with advice that always felt more like mockery. "Maybe something more traditional would suit you better, little brother." Family gatherings became exercises in endurance. Derek discussed property values in their exclusive neighborhood while I avoided mentioning my cramped apartment. He shared stories about treating local celebrities while I kept quiet about promising business connections. The pattern was established, his achievements were celebrated, my efforts dismissed. 3 years ago, at 31, I moved across Boston to a small studio apartment and poured everything into my third startup, a cybersecurity solution for small businesses. The idea came from watching my parents' dental practice struggle with digital security. Ironically, when I offered to help them, they hired an expensive consultant instead. That rejection sparked an idea that would eventually become my successful business model. For 2 years, I worked 18-hour days, building the company from nothing. I survived on ramen and coffee, reinvesting every penny of early revenue. Unlike my previous ventures, this one found its market fit quickly. Small medical practices and law firms, businesses with sensitive data but without corporate-sized ID budgets, became our client base. What my family didn't know, what I hadn't told them during our occasional phone calls, was that my company had just been acquired for $15 million. After taxes and paying investors, I'd personally netted just over $8 million. Not a fortune by tech standards, but life-changing for someone whose family still thought he was playing with computers. Despite everything, I still sought their approval. That's why I offered to host an elaborate dinner for my parents' 40th anniversary. Deep down, I thought financial success might finally earn their respect. Some childhood patterns are hard to break, even when you rationally know better. Looking back, I realized I'd spent my entire adult life trying to prove my worth to people who had decided my value long ago. The dinner I planned would become a turning point, just not in the way I had hoped. I'd made the reservation at Morton's Steakhouse in downtown Boston 3 weeks in advance. Not only was it one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city, but I'd also arranged for their private dining room, complete with a view of the harbor. The manager knew me by name. I'd closed several business deals there, and promised to provide their most attentive service. At precisely 7 o'clock, I arrived early to ensure everything was perfect. The table was immaculately set with fine china, crystal glassware, and sterling silver cutlery. I'd pre-ordered a bottle of Dom Perignon and selected a Chateau Margaux that cost more than my first car. The floral arrangements featured my mother's favorite lilies. Everything was designed to impress. My family arrived together, having coordinated their Boston visit without my input. Dad entered first, his posture still commanding at 68. Mom followed, her critical eye immediately assessing the restaurant's decor. Derek and his wife Stephanie came next, he in a tailored suit that screamed success, she in designer wear that matched his status. My sister Melissa and her husband Craig completed the group, both looking uncomfortable in the upscale setting. "This place seems excessive," my mother commented as the hosts took their coats. "No hello, no thank you, just immediate criticism." "Only the best for your anniversary," I replied, forcing enthusiasm. The awkward hugs that followed set the tone for the evening. As we settled into our seats, Derek immediately launched into a story about his recent country club membership. "The initiation fee was ridiculous," he boasted, "but the connections you make are priceless. Dad and I played with the chief of surgery last weekend." Our parents nodded approvingly while I signaled the sommelier. The champagne was poured, and I raised my glass. "To 40 amazing years," I toasted. They clinked glasses half-heartedly. "How's the computer business?" Dad asked vaguely as he studied the menu. "Actually, it's cybersecurity, and Derek just installed a new digital system at the practice." Mom interrupted, effectively cutting off my response. "It cost a fortune, but patient records are so important." Derek seized the opportunity. "We're completely paperless now. You should see the setup, state of the art." He paused, then added with a smirk, "Maybe you could give us some tech support if it crashes, Jason." Stephanie pulled out her phone. "Look at these new pictures of the kids," she announced, passing it to my parents. They cooed appropriately over images of Derek's perfect children while I sipped my champagne. "How's your place, Jason?" Melissa asked, attempting inclusion. Before I could answer, Derek jumped in. "Still in that condo downtown? Must be nice to only worry about yourself." The waiter arrived to take our orders, providing momentary relief from the tension. I selected the dry-aged porterhouse, and others followed with their choices. The conversation shifted to hometown gossip, which neighbors were divorcing, which local businesses were struggling, which church committees my mother had recently joined. All topics that excluded me, the family member who'd moved away. As appetizers arrived, I tried again. I've been thinking about setting up a scholarship at our old high school, I mentioned, for students interested in technology. That's generous, my father replied without enthusiasm. Though vocational training might serve them better. Not everyone can make it in the tech world. The subtle dig wasn't lost on me. Derek leaned forward slightly, his expression unusually tense beneath his standard confidence. He'd been drinking steadily since arrival, already on his third scotch. How's business at the practice? I asked, genuinely curious about his nervousness. Booming, he answered too quickly. We're booked months out. Thinking of bringing in another partner. That's wonderful. Mom beamed. Derek has such a way with patients. They request him specifically. Our main course has arrived, temporarily halting conversation. I noticed Derek checking his phone repeatedly, his brow furrowing at whatever messages he was receiving. Everything okay? I asked quietly while others were distracted. Fine, he snapped, sliding his phone into his pocket. Not all of us can sit around coding all day. Some of us have real responsibilities. I nodded and turned my attention to my steak. The meal continued with forced small talk about safe topics. Melissa's job teaching elementary school. Craig's recent promotion. My parents' plans for a European river cruise. Throughout it all, Derek continued drinking, his comments growing increasingly barbed. Remember when Jason tried to play basketball? He laughed suddenly, disrupting a moment of peaceful eating. Coach put him in for 2 minutes and he scored for the wrong team. My parents chuckled at the ancient embarrassment, while I maintained my composure. Some wounds never fully heal, even after 20 years. As dessert menus were presented, I decided to finally share my news. The evening couldn't get much worse, and maybe, just maybe, this might change their perception. I actually have an announcement, I said during a rare lull in conversation. All eyes turned to me with varying degrees of interest. My company was acquired last month. The deal just finalized. A moment of silence followed. Acquired? My father repeated. You mean you sold it? I nodded. For $15 million. More silence, then Derek laughed sharply. Yeah, right. It's true, I continued calmly. Innotech bought us out. It'll be in the business section next week. My mother looked bewildered. But your apartment, you never mentioned. I didn't want to jinx the deal before it closed, I explained. But it's done now. I've established a foundation for part of it and invested the rest. Derek's face had darkened considerably. Lucky break, he muttered. Not luck, I corrected gently. 4 years of 60-hour weeks and reinvesting every penny of profit. We built something valuable. After how many failures? Derek shot back. 2 bankruptcies, wasn't it? Dad had to co-sign your apartment lease after the first one. Derek, my mother cautioned, though her tone lacked conviction. It's fine, I said. Yes, I failed twice. Most entrepreneurs do before succeeding. Those failures taught me valuable lessons. Always the philosopher. Derek scoffed, his words slightly slurred. Dress up failure as learning experiences. Meanwhile, I built something real from day one. No mistakes, no do-overs. I took a deep breath. I'm actually establishing a scholarship at our high school for students interested in STEM fields. I thought it would be nice to give back to the community. My father nodded slightly, the first sign of genuine approval all evening. But Derek wasn't finished. This is all just for show, he said, voice rising. Several diners at nearby tables glanced our way. You're always the disappointment. Everyone knows you got lucky while I did everything right. The table fell silent. My mother's face flushed with embarrassment. My father stared at his dessert. Melissa looked ready to disappear under the table. Even Stephanie seemed shocked by her husband's outburst. In that moment, watching my 38-year-old brother behave like a jealous teenager, something shifted inside me. Years of seeking validation from people who would never provide it suddenly seemed absurd. The pattern was clear. and it would never change unless I changed my response to it. The silence following Derek's outburst stretched uncomfortably. The restaurant's ambient noise, soft conversations, the clink of silverware, waiters moving efficiently between tables, seemed to amplify in contrast to our table's tension. "Derek, that's enough," my father finally said, his voice low but stern. Not defending me, I noticed, but concerned about appearances. Derek wasn't finished. The alcohol had loosened whatever restraint he normally maintained. "No, Dad, I'm tired of pretending. Jason shows up with his fancy restaurant reservation after barely visiting for years, and suddenly we're supposed to act impressed? I visit for every holiday," I replied calmly, though my heart was racing. "And spend the whole time on your laptop," he countered. "Remember last Christmas? Mom spent 3 days cooking, and you were answering emails during dinner." There was a kernel of truth there. I had been finalizing the acquisition term sheet during that visit, the biggest deal of my life, but I couldn't explain that at the time. "I apologize for that," I said. "Classic Jason," Derek continued, ignoring me. "Always had an excuse for everything. Remember when he missed Dad's retirement party? Some server emergency. Or when he skipped Thanksgiving because of a critical investor meeting that probably never existed. That investor put in $500,000, I said quietly. The meeting couldn't be rescheduled." My mother touched Derek's arm gently. "Perhaps we should discuss family matters privately, not in a restaurant." Derek shook her off. "Why? So we can pretend everything's fine again? Jason swoops in with his tech money, thinking it erases years of being absent. Meanwhile, I've been there for every birthday, every anniversary, every doctor's appointment." I noticed his emphasis on doctor, and something clicked. The nervous phone checking, the excessive drinking, the heightened hostility. Something was wrong at the practice. "No one's discounting your contributions, Derek," I said carefully. "I'm just sharing some good news." "Your good news is what, exactly?" he sneered. "That you got lucky with some computer program while the rest of us did actual work? Dad built that practice for 40 years. 40 years of showing up every day, not chasing get-rich-quick schemes." My father shifted uncomfortably. "Derek, that's not fair. Jason has worked hard in his own way." The lukewarm defense was typical, acknowledging me just enough to appear supportive while still prioritizing Derek's feelings. "His own way," Derek repeated mockingly. "That's what we always said, right? Jason does things his own way. Remember his first business? Burned through grandma's inheritance in 8 months? Then the second one, how many investors lost money on that one, Jason?" Each failure being thrown in my face stung, but I maintained my composure. "That's how startups work sometimes. High risk, high reward. High risk with other people's money," Derek shot back. "While I put in 12-hour days treating patients, building something real. I respect what you've built," I said sincerely. "I've never claimed my path was better, just different." "Different?" he scoffed. "That's a nice way of saying easier. You sit behind a computer while I deal with people in pain every day. You fail repeatedly and call it learning. You disappear for months, then show up with champagne expecting applause." Stephanie placed her hand on Derek's arm. "Honey, maybe we should." "No," he interrupted, pulling away. His face had reddened, either from alcohol or emotion. "Everyone's always tiptoeing around him. Poor Jason, so misunderstood. Well, I'm tired of it." He turned to our parents. "Tell him, Dad. Tell him how you had to explain to your friends why your son was living in a studio apartment at 30. Tell him, Mom, how you changed the subject when your principal friends asked what Jason was doing with his life." My parents' uncomfortable expressions confirmed the truth of his words. They had been embarrassed by me, by my unconventional path and early failures. "I never claimed to be perfect," I said, maintaining eye contact with Derek. "But I built something valuable. Something that helps thousands of small businesses protect their data." "There he goes again." Derek laughed bitterly. The visionary. Meanwhile, Who took care of Mom after her surgery last year? Who handles their taxes, their house repairs, their lives? Not their tech genius son. I offered to help financially. I reminded him. You said it wasn't necessary. Because it wasn't about money. Derek's voice rose again. It was about showing up. Being present. Derek, please, my mother whispered, glancing anxiously at nearby tables. My brother ignored her, leaning across the table toward me. You know what your problem is, Jason? You think money fixes everything. Throw cash at a problem and disappear again. That's not family. The irony of his statement would become apparent the next day, but in that moment, it just felt like another attack. I've made mistakes, I acknowledged. I should have been more present. The business consumed me, but that's not an excuse. Save the corporate apology, Derek snapped. This is exactly what I mean. Everything's a transaction to you. Show up with an expensive dinner, announce your millions, act magnanimous about your scholarship. It's all for show. Something in his tone, the raw contempt, finally broke through my practiced calm. 20 years of diminishment crystallized in that moment. What exactly do you want from me, Derek? I asked, my voice steady but firm. I've acknowledged my mistakes. I've built a successful business. I'm trying to reconnect with my family. What more should I do? You could start by being honest, he said cryptically. Stop pretending you're some tech genius when we all know you just got lucky. Stop acting like your way is better than the path the rest of us took. I've never said my way was better. You didn't have to say it. Derek's fist hit the table, causing glasses to jump. It's in every smug look, every vague answer about your business, every time you change the subject when Dad talks about the practice. You think you're better than us. The accusation hung in the air, so wildly inaccurate that I almost laughed. I'd spent my entire life feeling inferior, chasing their approval, measuring myself against Derek's seemingly perfect life. That's not true, I said quietly. I've always admired what you built. Bullshit, Derek spat. This whole dinner, this whole performance, it's just to show off. Look what the family disappointment accomplished. Well, congratulations on your exit or whatever tech bros call it. But don't expect us to be impressed by money when you've been absent for everything that actually matters. The final phrase, family disappointment, landed like a physical blow. Not because it was new, but because I suddenly realized I'd been hearing some version of it my entire life. I looked around the table at the faces of my family. Mom, embarrassed but not defending me. Dad, uncomfortable but silent. Melissa, conflicted but ultimately loyal to our parents. And Derek, the golden child, finally saying aloud what had been implied for decades. In that moment, something shifted. The validation I'd been seeking my entire life suddenly seemed hollow, even if they offered it now. I realized I didn't need their approval to value myself or my accomplishments. I'm sorry you feel that way, I said simply. The simple response, I'm sorry you feel that way, seemed to catch Derek off guard. He'd clearly expected either an angry retort or a hurt withdrawal. Instead, I maintained eye contact, my expression neutral but firm. That's it, he demanded. That's all you have to say? I nodded slightly, then turned toward our server who had been hovering uncertainly nearby, witnessing the uncomfortable scene. Could I get the check, please? I asked, my voice steady. The waiter nodded gratefully and disappeared. We haven't even finished dessert, my mother protested weakly. I think we've finished enough, I replied, not unkindly. An awkward silence descended on the table. My father cleared his throat but said nothing. Melissa studied her half-eaten cheesecake with sudden fascination. Even Derek seemed momentarily out of ammunition, taken aback by my calm disengagement. Jason, Derek didn't mean, my mother began. Yes, he did, I interrupted gently. And that's okay. He's entitled to his opinion. The waiter returned with a leather folder containing the bill. I glimpsed the total as I opened it, $2,347.82, including the premium wines and substantial tip I'd pre-authorized. Without comment, I slipped my black card inside and handed it back. You don't have to pay for everyone, my father said, reaching for his wallet in what seemed more like a gesture than genuine intent. I invited you, I replied simply. It's already handled. Derek shifted in his seat, the angry flush in his face fading to something more complicated. Look, maybe I had too much to drink. I was just joking around. The backpedaling was transparent. He'd seen my reaction wasn't what he expected, and now he was trying to reframe his cruelty as humor. It was a familiar pattern, one I'd accepted too many times before. We all say things we mean sometimes, I replied, signing the receipt the waiter had discreetly returned. Especially after a few drinks. Jason, my sister finally spoke up. No one thinks you're a disappointment. Derek was just. It's fine, Melissa, I said, standing up and buttoning my suit jacket. Really? I looked around the table, making brief eye contact with each family member. Thank you all for coming tonight. I hope you enjoyed the meal. Mom and Dad, happy anniversary. 40 years is a remarkable achievement. You're leaving? My mother asked, seeming genuinely surprised. Yes, I confirmed. I have an early meeting tomorrow. It wasn't true, but it was simpler than explaining that I'd finally reached my limit, that after decades of seeking their approval, I'd realized it would never come in the form I needed. But we just got here yesterday, my father protested. We were hoping to see your office tomorrow, maybe have lunch. The sudden interest in my professional life, coming only after learning about the acquisition, felt too little, too late. Another time, I said. I'll call you to arrange it. I walked around the table, giving each person a brief, polite goodbye. My mother's hug was stiff, my father's handshake formal. Melissa whispered, I'll call you tomorrow, while Craig nodded awkwardly. Stephanie avoided eye contact entirely. When I reached Derek, he stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. You can't just leave because someone finally told you the truth. I regarded him calmly. Good night, Derek. Drive safely. As I walked through the restaurant, I maintained perfect posture, nodding politely to the maitre d' and retrieving my coat from the check room. Only when I reached my car in the parking garage did I allow my composure to crack. Sitting in the driver's seat of my Audi, I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel and finally released the breath I felt like I'd been holding all evening. A complex mixture of emotions washed over me: hurt, anger, disappointment, but also a strange sense of liberation. For the first drive home, I let the tears come. Not loud, dramatic sobs, but quiet streams that carried away decades of trying to be someone my family would approve of. By the time I reached the halfway point, the tears had stopped, replaced by a curious feeling of lightness. My condo building came into view, a luxury high-rise overlooking Boston Harbor. I'd purchased the penthouse after the acquisition, though I'd told no one in my family about the upgrade. The doorman greeted me by name as I entered. Upstairs, I stepped onto my balcony and gazed at the city lights reflecting on the dark water. The cool night air cleared my head as I processed what had just happened. My phone had been buzzing continuously since I left the restaurant. Texts from Melissa, missed calls from my mother, even one from Derek. I silenced it without reading the messages. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't racing to smooth things over, to make everyone else comfortable at my expense. The realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. I poured myself a glass of the same expensive scotch that Derek had been drinking at dinner and settled onto my sofa. Tomorrow would bring complications, explanations, probably guilt trips. But tonight, I allowed myself to acknowledge a simple truth. I'd spent my life seeking validation from people who fundamentally didn't understand or value my choices. As I drifted toward sleep, I made a decision. I would establish boundaries, real ones this time. I would offer forgiveness, but not at the expense of my self-respect. I would love my family without needing their approval. What I didn't know was how quickly that resolve would be tested. I couldn't have imagined that less than 12 hours later, Derek would be at my door, his entire carefully constructed life crumbling around him. My phone's news alert chimed at 7:15 the next morning, pulling me from a surprisingly deep sleep. I'd expected insomnia after the previous night's confrontation, but instead found myself more rested than I'd been in months. The weight of seeking approval I'd never receive had apparently been exhausting me for years. I reached for my phone, expecting to dismiss the alert and check my emails. Instead, the headline stopped me cold. Prominent local dental practice under investigation for insurance fraud. Below it was a photo of my father's, now Derek's, practice. Suddenly, my brother's behavior made terrible sense. His aggression, his drinking, the nervous phone checking, it hadn't just been about my success, but about his impending downfall. I sat up and quickly scanned the article. The details were vague, citing ongoing investigation and allegations of systematic billing irregularities. But the implications were clear. The practice was in serious trouble. My phone showed 37 missed calls, 23 text messages, 9 voicemails, most from family members, with Derek's name appearing most frequently. The most recent text, from my mother, simply read, "Please call. Emergency." I played the first voicemail, from 11:30 p.m. the previous night. My mother's voice was barely recognizable, high-pitched and panicky. "Jason, call us immediately. There's been a terrible mistake. Derek is being set up by someone at the practice. He needs your help. Please call back." Each subsequent message grew more desperate. By the final one, left at 6:45 a.m., my mother was openly sobbing, begging me to answer. I stepped into the shower, needing time to think before returning these calls. The hot water helped clear my mind as I processed this dramatic shift in family dynamics. Just hours ago, I'd been the disappointment. Now, apparently, I was their only hope. After getting dressed, I made coffee and opened my laptop, searching for more information. Local news sites had little beyond what I'd already seen, but a deeper search revealed concerning patterns. The state dental board had been investigating several practices for fraudulent billing codes. An anonymous source claimed my father's practice was the worst offender. As I read, a text arrived from Derek. "I'm outside your building. Need to talk." For a moment, I considered ignoring it. After years of dismissal and last night's public humiliation, the petty part of me wanted him to suffer the same rejection he'd so often inflicted. But something in the simple desperation of his message made me respond. "Coming down." In the lobby, the doorman informed me that someone was waiting. "He seems distressed, Mr. Mitchell. Should I call security?" "No, it's fine. My brother." Outside, Derek sat on a bench, looking nothing like the confident, polished man from dinner. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair uncombed. He'd clearly been crying. "Jason," he said, standing when he saw me. "Thank God." I maintained some distance, not yet ready for reconciliation. "How did you find my building? Mom had the address from sending you Christmas cards." He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "Can we talk privately?" Part of me wanted to refuse, to make him state his business on a public bench as passers-by witnessed his desperation. But I wasn't him. "Come up." In my penthouse, Derek's eyes widened at the floor-to-ceiling windows, the modern furniture, the obvious luxury. On another day, he might have made a snide comment. Today, he seemed too broken to muster even performative superiority. "Coffee?" I offered, more from habit than hospitality. "Please." He sat heavily on my sofa, hands shaking slightly. I handed him a mug and took the chair opposite, waiting. "I've ruined everything," he finally said, voice cracking. "Everything." "The practice is under investigation," I stated. He nodded miserably. "It's worse than what's in the news. Much worse. Tell me." And so he did. The story poured out of him, a tale of mounting debts, secret gambling addiction, and increasingly desperate measures to cover his tracks. "It started small," he explained. "Coding a simple procedure as something more complex. Insurance pays more, patient doesn't know the difference." He stared into his coffee. But then I needed more. Bigger bets to recover losses. More complex fraud to cover larger debts. How much? I asked quietly. 1.2 million, he whispered. Over 3 years. The number hung in the air between us. Not just the amount stolen, but the duration, a sustained, deliberate criminal enterprise, not a momentary lapse in judgment. Dad doesn't know the full extent, Derek continued. He thinks it was just some billing errors, maybe 100,000. But the investigators found everything yesterday. Executed a search warrant after hours. His voice broke. They have all the records, Jason. I'm going to prison. What about the practice? Finished. Dad's reputation destroyed right before retirement. 40 years of work gone because of me. Fresh tears spilled down his cheeks. The house is mortgaged to the limit. Stephanie found out everything last night after dinner. She's taking the kids to her parents in Connecticut. The irony wasn't lost on me. Derek, who'd spent the previous evening attacking me for my failures, had been living a fraudulent life the entire time. The golden child had been fool's gold all along. What do you want from me? I asked, my tone neutral. Money, he admitted. For lawyers. For restitution. Maybe we can work out a deal with the prosecutors if I can pay everything back. And last night? I couldn't help asking. All that talk about me thinking money fixes everything? About me being absent while you handled real responsibilities? He had the grace to look ashamed. I was terrified. The investigators had already contacted me. I knew everything was about to explode. And then you announced your success and I just broke. You humiliated me in front of our entire family. Called me a disappointment. I know. He looked up, eyes red. The truth is, I've been jealous of you for years. The admission stunned me. Jealous? Of what? Your freedom. Your choices. He gestured around the penthouse. Your ability to fail and try again. Dad co-signed your apartment lease after your first business failed. When I missed a mortgage payment during COVID, he lectured me for an hour about responsibility. That's not. Golden children don't get second chances, Jason. We get expectations. Endless, crushing expectations. He wiped his eyes. I'm not excusing what I did. It was criminal. Unforgivable. But watching you announce your millions after years of them dismissing you, I couldn't handle it. Everything I'd sacrificed to be the good son was about to be exposed as fraud, while you emerged triumphant. The revelation shifted something in me. Not enough for immediate forgiveness, but enough to recognize the complex web of family dynamics that had trapped us both. I can't just write you a check, Derek. I know. I don't deserve your help. He stood up, defeated. I shouldn't have come. As he moved toward the door, I made a decision that would alter our family forever. Sit down, I said quietly. I didn't say I wouldn't help. I said I wouldn't just write a check. Derek slowly returned to the sofa, hope cautiously animating his exhausted features. What does that mean? It means we need to talk about conditions, I replied, pulling out my phone. First, I'm calling my attorney. 20 minutes later, after a brief but intense conversation with Sarah, the lawyer who'd handled my company's acquisition, I had a clearer picture of Derek's legal situation. It was grim but not hopeless. Insurance fraud carries up to 10 years, I explained to Derek. But as a first-time offender with full cooperation and restitution, you're looking at potentially 18 to 36 months, possibly with weekend incarceration that would allow you to work during the week. He nodded numbly. What are your conditions? 3 things, I said. First, complete transparency. No more lies, no minimizing, no hiding. I need to know exactly what happened and what we're facing. Okay. Second, you get help. Real help for the gambling, yes, but also therapy. This didn't happen overnight. There are deeper issues we both need to address. His jaw tightened defensively, then relaxed. Fine. Third, and most important, you face consequences. I won't help you escape responsibility. I'll help you navigate this in the healthiest way possible, but you will answer for your actions. Derek stared at the floor for several long moments. Finally, he looked up. Why would you help me at all? After everything I've done, everything I said. It was a fair question. One I'd been asking myself since seeing him in my lobby. Because you're my brother, I said simply. And because I think we've both been damaged by the same family system, just in different ways. He nodded slowly. What now? Now we go to Mom and Dad's hotel. They need to know the full truth, and they need to hear it from you. The drive to my parents' hotel was silent. Derek stared out the passenger window, occasionally checking his phone for messages from Stephanie. There were none. In the hotel suite, my parents looked like they'd aged years overnight. My mother's eyes were swollen from crying. My father, always so commanding, seemed diminished somehow, shoulders hunched under an invisible weight. Jason. My mother rushed toward me. Thank God you're here. We need to hire lawyers, PR people. Your father's practice is the least of our concerns right now. I interrupted gently. Derek has something to tell you. I guided her back to the sofa beside my father. Derek remained standing, facing them like a man before a firing squad. The fraud wasn't a mistake, he began, voice trembling. And it wasn't a setup. I did it deliberately, over 3 years. I've had a gambling problem for almost 5 years now. My mother gasped. My father's face went completely blank, the expression he always wore when processing devastating news. Derek continued, laying out the full extent of his crimes, his addiction, his mounting desperation. He explained how he'd remortgaged their family home, which they'd foolishly put in his name for estate planning purposes, to cover gambling debts. How he'd falsified insurance claims, billed for procedures never performed, and systematically stolen from both insurance companies and patients. When he finished, the silence was deafening. How could you? My father finally whispered, voice ragged with betrayal. Robert, my mother turned to him. We need to focus on fixing this. Jason can help with lawyers. No, Mom, I interjected firmly. This isn't something we fix by throwing money at it and pretending it never happened. That approach is exactly how we got here. Her expression hardened. What's that supposed to mean? It means our family has patterns, I explained. Patterns of avoiding difficult truths, of maintaining appearances at all costs, of different rules for different children. This isn't the time for your grievances, Jason, my father said stiffly. This isn't about grievances. It's about healing something that's been broken for a long time. I turned to Derek. Tell them the rest. He swallowed hard. Jason has offered to help, but with conditions. I need to take responsibility, make restitution, and get treatment for my addiction. He'll help with legal representation and possibly restitution, but I have to face consequences. What consequences? My mother demanded. You're our son. We protect you. That protection has become part of the problem, I said gently. Derek needs accountability, not rescue. My father stood abruptly. So that's your game? Force your brother to grovel while you play savior with your new money? The accusation stung, but I maintained my composure. No. This isn't about revenge or power. It's about doing what's actually best for Derek, not what feels best in the moment. And you know what's best for my son? He challenged. Better than you do right now, I replied evenly. Because I'm not blinded by the same patterns that have defined this family for decades. My mother began to cry again. Derek moved to comfort her, but I caught his eye and slightly shook my head. Her tears had always been a powerful tool for maintaining the status quo, for shutting down difficult conversations. I've retained Catherine Brennan, I continued, naming one of Boston's top criminal defense attorneys. She'll meet with Derek tomorrow to begin preparation. The goal is a negotiated plea that includes restitution, minimizes jail time, and allows for treatment. Jail? My mother choked. Yes, Mom. Jail. Derek's voice was firm for the first time. I committed multiple felonies. People go to jail for that. The simple acknowledgement of reality seemed to shift something in the room. My father sat back down heavily, suddenly looking every one of his 68 years. The practice is finished, he said quietly. Probably, I agreed. But your reputation doesn't have to be. There's a path through this that preserves some dignity, but it requires complete honesty. Over the next 3 hours, we outlined a strategy. I would establish a trust to protect my parents' home from asset seizure. Derek would cooperate fully with investigators and make a clean breast of everything. We would hire not just legal representation but also a PR firm specializing in crisis management. Most importantly, Derek would enter an intensive treatment program for gambling addiction. What about Stephanie and the kids? My mother asked. That's up to her, Derek replied, the pain evident in his voice. I can't control her response, and I shouldn't try. It was the healthiest thing I'd ever heard him say. By late afternoon, we had a plan. Not a perfect one, and certainly not one that would make everything go away, but a plan grounded in reality rather than denial. As we prepared to leave, my father pulled me aside. I don't understand why you're doing this. After last night. Last night was the culmination of patterns that have hurt all of us, I said. Including you and Mom, whether you see it or not. We did our best, he insisted. I know you did, I replied, surprising both of us with my sincerity. But your best included some serious blind spots. We all need to do better now. Over the following weeks, our plan unfolded. Catherine Brennan worked miracles, negotiating a plea deal that included restitution, 2 years of weekend incarceration, and mandatory treatment. The practice was sold to a larger dental group, salvaging something from my father's retirement. My mother initially resisted family therapy, but eventually joined when it became clear it was a non-negotiable condition of my assistance. Derek's first genuine apology came 3 weeks after his arrest. Not the desperate, self-serving, "I'm sorry," of a man seeking bailout, but the authentic remorse of someone finally confronting his own destructive patterns. I meant what I said about being jealous, he told me during a private conversation. You had the courage to chart your own course. I just did what was expected, then resented you for my choice. Those words marked the beginning of something new between us, not instant brotherhood, but the foundation for an authentic relationship built on truth rather than competition. My parents struggled more with the shifting dynamic. Decades of established patterns don't change overnight. But slowly, painfully, they began acknowledging their role in our dysfunctional family system. My father admitted that his relentless pressure on Derek had contributed to his son's belief that failure was unacceptable at any cost. My mother recognized how her different treatment of us had fostered unhealthy competition. Small steps, but significant ones. 18 months later, I stood in my parents' backyard, manning the grill at our monthly family dinner. So much had changed since that fateful night at Morton's Steakhouse. Derek was halfway through his sentence, spending weekends at the minimum security facility and weekdays working at an accounting firm that had taken a chance on him despite his conviction. The gambling addiction treatment had been grueling but effective. He was now 15 months clean, attending GA meetings 3 times weekly. My parents had downsized to a comfortable condo, their retirement plans adjusted but not destroyed. My father volunteered at a free dental clinic 2 days a week, finding unexpected fulfillment in serving those who couldn't afford care. My mother had joined a support group for families affected by addiction, slowly unlearning her enabling behaviors. Stephanie had filed for divorce, but after Derek's consistent demonstration of change, they'd begun cautious reconciliation. She and the children had attended last month's dinner, a tense but hopeful reunion. My own life had continued evolving as well. I'd launched a new startup focused on healthcare compliance software, ironically inspired by the billing issues that had brought down my brother. The foundation I'd established had funded 10 scholarships at our old high school, with recipients selected based on resilience and creativity rather than traditional metrics. Need any help? Derek asked, approaching with 2 beers. I accepted one, noting the ease between us that would have been unimaginable 2 years ago. I think I've got it under control. How was the meeting this morning? Good. Hard but good. He took a sip. I spoke for the first time. Told the whole story. How'd that feel? Terrifying. Liberating. He gazed across the yard where our parents were setting the table. Never thought we'd be here. Here meant many things, Derek owning his mistakes instead of hiding them. Our parents treating us as adults with equal value rather than as the golden child and the disappointment. All of us gathering voluntarily instead of out of obligation. Remember what you said that night? Derek asked. About money not fixing everything? I nodded. You were right. If you'd just written a check, none of this would have changed. He gestured vaguely toward our parents. They'd still be enabling me. I'd still be resenting you. The patterns would have continued. Sometimes boundaries are the greatest form of love, I replied. Took me 34 years to learn that. My father approached, carrying a platter for the steaks. The past 18 months had aged him, silver now dominating his once dark hair. But there was something lighter about him too, the burden of perfectionism finally set down. You two solving the world's problems? He asked, with a genuine warmth that once would have been reserved only for Derek. Just reflecting on how far we've come, I answered. He nodded, his expression turning serious. I was wrong about many things, Jason. The way we treated you growing up. The different standards. Last year, at that dinner, I raised a hand to stop him. We've covered this ground, Dad. Moving forward, remember? Moving forward, he agreed. But never forgetting the lessons. After dinner, as twilight settled over the yard, an unexpected moment of connection emerged. Derek and I found ourselves alone on the patio, the distant sounds of our parents cleaning up in the kitchen providing a domestic soundtrack. You know what's strange? Derek said quietly. For the first time in my life, I'm not pretending. I'm a convicted felon with a gambling addiction working an entry-level job at 40. And I've never felt more authentic. I understood completely. And I'm the successful tech entrepreneur our parents now brag about to their friends. But that matters so much less than it once would have. We broke the pattern, Derek observed. We're breaking it, I corrected. It's ongoing work. My phone chimed with a message from my new girlfriend, asking when I'd be home. As I typed a quick reply, I reflected on how this journey had affected all my relationships. I now valued authenticity over appearance, substance over status. The partners I chose, the friends I kept, the business decisions I made, all were guided by lessons learned through family pain. You know, I said, tucking my phone away. Sometimes being the disappointment means you're the only one brave enough to break toxic patterns. Derek raised his bottle in a toast. To disappointments, then. I clinked my bottle against his. To authentic connections. In the gathering darkness, watching fireflies emerge like distant stars, I felt a profound peace. The validation I'd once desperately sought from my family now seemed far less important than the genuine relationships we were slowly building. The wounds weren't fully healed, some never would be. But they had transformed from festering injuries into teachable scars, reminders of where we'd been and how far we'd come. Sometimes family trauma creates the very strength needed to overcome it. Sometimes disappointment is merely the first step toward authentic living. And sometimes, paying the bill and walking away is the beginning, not the end, of the most important journey. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who couldn't see your worth? Drop a comment below sharing how you handled it. Your story might help someone else find the courage to break toxic patterns in their own life. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family challenges and finding your authentic path. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the greatest act of love is having the courage to walk away from people who can't see your true value.